We've all heard the horror stories of bad landlords. They refuse to fix leaky roofs, fix broken air conditioners, and threaten to kick our pets out. Regardless, we continue to pay our rent, but the landlords still want to evict us? I'm Braden Lambert.
I'm Maddie Smith.
And I'm Reagan Matthews.
And we're all here as students at UNT, and we're here to talk about illegal eviction. What did y'all actually know, about illegal eviction before we even started doing this project?
I never thought about it. I was
Same,
never
honestly.
going about my day like illegal eviction.
You only see it really in movies or TV shows, and those
Yeah.
are the worst case scenarios, right?
Exactly. Even when I lived at an apartment building, I never even thought about eviction because you just assume that everything goes right. You'd assume the landlord's going to go keep his word every single time, and you assume everything's going to go right. But then when we actually look at it, it happens a lot more than you'd actually think. And there's so little you can actually do about it.
I think it's kind of a bigger problem than people realize, and unless you're in that situation, then you aren't going to think about it. Unless you're day to day on bills or stuff like that.
Yeah, if I was just kicked out of my apartment building, I would have had no idea what I was going to do. I would have sat there and been like, okay, well, this just happened.
I didn't know you could be kicked out so fast. If you haven't read your lease, you might want to, because the Texas Apartments have an association. And first off, they all share a lease, and that lease says that you can be evicted within 24 hours. So it surpasses the Texas requirement of 3 days because you signed away that right.
Within 24 hours of just whatever
Notice.
they do. Of notice?
They only have to give you 24-hour notice in your apartment.
And
That's
usually
wild.
the notice is a 3-day window instead of 24 hours.
Oh, and I found out it's only a 3-day window in Texas. Other states will give you 10 days. Or it varies per state, but
Interesting. That is wild.
it's short.
So what do you do when you are illegally evicted?
My hope is I'm going to have a lawyer friend.
A lawyer friend.
Yeah.
That always helps in lots of different situations.
So we found out that the people who come with representation to the eviction hearing, they win their cases more often than the people who don't come with representation. And that's simply because there's someone there fighting for them who know the ins and outs of the law and won't just bulldoze you over.
Another thing that I learned when it comes to illegal eviction is the different tiny little variables that come into account with illegal eviction. Like the fact that you can't put the notice outside of the door, but you have to put it inside so the wind doesn't blow it off. And if that happens, you can hold it for what? You can for a month?
You can go to court and get your eviction dismissed.
Dismissed fully.
Yeah.
But then the landlord can just file again.
He can file again, but that period of time that you get between those filings, that can really help you out. You can ask for money from friends or family. You can borrow from them, or you can even get on the rent assistance from the government, or even find another apartment or place to live.
We'll give you time to find a pro bono lawyer.
Correct. Yep. So another place that you can go and turn to for help is the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center. They're a group of lawyers that will represent you, and you don't need requirements. So Mr. Mark Melton, he founded it with his wife after COVID-19 and the moratorium that was put on rent. And he just got interested that way, and people on Twitter were like, we need help. And he said, I will help. Melton was very adamant that people need legal representation because eviction is inherently a legal process. Landlords don't follow the rules, and tenants pay the price. So having representation that his group can give you is very essential.
One thing that I learned is that it's not even just landlords who are unlawful. Like in Mesquite, which has a huge eviction rate, I'm pretty sure. There's an apartment complex, the Hillcrest community, and the building is unlivable. The building's unlivable, and so the city condemned it because it had no air conditioning, it had leaks and mold. But the city just condemned it and didn't care about the people who were living there. And now the complex is having to evict the people who are living there. They have nowhere to go.
And it sounds like those people were choosing to live there in those conditions, meaning they probably didn't have any other choice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be without AC or have leaks in my ceiling. Who knows the kind of mold and junk that was growing in there.
Is the solution not to just go and get help?
That's the individual solution. So you as an individual, you get evicted and you seek help, right?
Mhm.
So you go to a tenants union who can teach you how to defend yourself in court, or
Mhm.
you go to a lawyer if you can afford one, or pro bono one if you're lucky enough to find one.
Mhm.
And best case scenario, you get to keep your house with a shitty landlord, right? Or at least a landlord who hates you. But I mean, solutions
Are we
on
looking for
a
a
massive
solution
level.
for the entire problem of illegal eviction?
I don't know if we have one of those,
Exactly, that's the
but
problem.
Mark mentioned creating tenants unions. So just like the Hillcrest community did,
Mhm.
making a community in your own community, which is repetitive, but essentially that's what it is. It's getting to know your neighbors enough so that you care about what happens to them.
Right.
Sandy also mentioned that this is a legislative problem. So they've been petitioning court with tenants and their representation on changing the legislation itself. So this can be easier for tenants to win their cases, and landlords can't do predatorial actions against you, stuff like that.
Yeah, she mentioned two different legislative actions. One is, Texas only requires 3 days, but in every other state, tenants have a 10-day period to right the wrong, essentially. So even if it is the tenant's fault.
So say they didn't pay rent. They have now 10 more days that they could pay that rent and make up for it?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. And the landlord
And
can't do anything legally.
Did you say that's everywhere but Texas?
Not everywhere, but from what it sounded like, most states, yes.
Speaking to the demographics of evictions, we know that evictions happen least often in neighborhoods where there are more seniors, there are more white residents, and median incomes are higher. Evictions happen most often in neighborhoods where there are more renters, makes sense, there are more residents of color, and the median incomes are lower. So this comes from Child Action Poverty Lab, and this is their eviction filings in Dallas County.
Are there any actually like statistic numbers on amount of illegal evictions anywhere? Did we find any stats on that?
Well, illegal evictions,
Untrackable, right?
they're kind of untrackable, yeah, unfortunately. Because so many people just choose to move out, yeah, instead of trying to fight it. Whether they don't have the money to go to court or the time. There was this one story that this woman literally gave birth the day before her court date. She couldn't make it to court.
Was she still evicted?
And she was evicted?
They're still fighting it. It's an ongoing case right now.
So how much does eviction just happen in general?
Well, as of 2018, Dallas County specifically had a higher rate of eviction than the national average. So the national average is 7.8%, and Dallas is 8.4%.
What does that 7.8% mean?
It means that out of 100 households, essentially 8 are being evicted.
Okay.
Out of every 100.
Dallas is above that national average.
Yes, and that's only from 2018. Think about how COVID affected this.
Oh yeah, that number's up.
And the housing market is very much in flux right now.
Oh, absolutely.
The Child Poverty Action Lab, they did a court observation here in Dallas, I believe, and they went to 3 different Justice of the Peace courts, and they observed and marked down how many eviction cases there were. They noticed that the average amount of time spent at these hearings for evictions, 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
For the entire hearing.
Yes. They are deciding the fate of families with children, single mothers, people who are just down on their luck in less than 4 minutes.
They're changing people's livelihoods in less than 4 minutes.
Correct.
That's insane. Okay, treat me as if I know nothing. What's a justice of the peace? What's their role? Yeah,
They
treat
provide marriages.
What are you talking about?
Aren't they?
The first thing you...
Yes.
Okay, who gives a shit when it comes to eviction if they provide marriages?
Bro, exactly. Why are they doing both?
You make
Why-
a great point.
Why can they go get Johnny and Jamie hitched at noon and then evict somebody at 1 p.m.?
That is a great point.
That's why I brought it up.
Bro, you just blew up.
So once Johnny and Jamie are out of the courtroom hitched,
They can also evict them.
unfortunately.
Johnny and Jamie didn't pay their rent on time. Now they're on the street.
So the Justice of the Peace, they preside over justice courts involving cases of misdemeanors, small civil disputes, and landlord-tenant disputes. They can also perform marriages, like we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We know from the Child Action Poverty Lab, their findings were that most eviction cases were due to non-payment of rent. That's about 67% of the cases that they heard. There were 25% unknown, so the reason could have been unknown if it was dismissed or they didn't even hear the facts of the case. 3% of a holdover, 2% of multiple reasons cited, and 1% of violated lease. Says the reason for an eviction case might be unknown if a default judgment was awarded to a landlord and the facts of the case were not discussed.
So it's like if somebody doesn't show up to their court date,
Basically.
somebody just is like, all right.
Yeah. Eviction's legal. Kick them out.
But whenever the landlord actually files the eviction, do they not have to have a specific reason?
Well, I think that's all presented in court because...
Doesn't the Justice of the Peace have to sign off to put the eviction notice in the first place?
No.
No. Oh,
That
so
notice to vacate is given 3 days before the filing.
Okay, gotcha. And so
And-
the first time a JP hears about this is when it's actually in court.
Correct.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
And so we also know that a written notice to vacate is, like I said, the first legal step, right? But it was only confirmed 33% of times in the observed hearings. So like we were saying, they don't have to present all the facts. They can just be like, I want to kick out my tenant. And if the tenant's not there, especially, they just say, okay, signed off on it, and now you're allowed to get kicked out. That's why showing up to court is so important.
One thing that nobody has talked to us about that still bothers me is that nobody's tracking biased JPs. Nobody's keeping track of landlords, right? Because when I went in and I looked at the public records, there were repetitive offenders. Landlords will just repetitively evict people, and JPs are not supposed to track it. The courts aren't supposed to track it.
Yeah,
We're assuming every time that the tenant is the one at fault and not the landlord who you see every other year or every year in court.
Yeah. Is there any punishment if a landlord like goes in and they're like they did nothing wrong and you're trying to evict them? What happens to the landlord?
They just get reprimanded.
What is that?
No, I don't think they get reprimanded. Sorry, nothing happens.
Nothing
to
at
them.
all.
No,
They
even
just-
if they go in and they find out that the landlord was evicting them illegally. So if they did something wrong in the process, nothing happens to the landlord. Yo, to be honest, I still don't think I understand eviction.
Oh, I don't either.
There's so many what ifs.
That's the thing about it. There's no clear path.
Mm-mm.
You don't know how many people are getting evicted illegally. You don't know exactly what a legal eviction is, with how many different laws there are, and how many times if you don't come to court, you can get kicked out. And you don't know if there's JP has a bias towards a certain landlord. That's what's so difficult about a legal eviction in the first place.
there's not an easy solution
Exactly.
for this.
From the University of North Texas, I'm Braden Lambert,
I'm Maddie Smith.
Reagan Matthews.
and y'all have a great day.